Actually recorded. All right, welcome superhumans. We are here, just so you know, this is round 2. We did this whole segment and then Kari didn't press record. So this is coming at you for the second time, but first time to you guys. We're excited to introduce you guys to Christina from Trailside. She is a physiotherapist with an extensive background in athletics and performance and injury management and rehabilitation. We work closely with Trailside and have done so for the last 10 years. So I'm excited for you to meet Christina. Christina, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Like Kari said, I'm a physio at Trailside Physio. I have been doing this for 10 years now. It's always easy to remember when you graduate in 2010.
Right.
I prefer to work with orthopedic injuries and sports-related injuries, which is what got me over to Trailside. I guess if my sports background would be more in soccer and weightlifting, but I'm delving a little bit more into cycling these days. And yeah, that's that.
Right on. And you mentioned in take 1 of this that you actually got introduced to personal training and weightlifting at a pretty early age, right? Like 15 years old or something like that?
Yeah, I was really fortunate. I grew up playing soccer, and my parents, not being terribly athletic people, but intellectuals, decided to do all of the research on how to have their kids have the best opportunities and what they need to do to not get injured. And so my parents got me a strength coach when I was 15. So I've been in the gym ever since. And even after I retired from soccer, I just love weightlifting. So yeah.
Awesome. And we see that as a huge asset, right? You can really, your perspective as an athlete, as somebody who's trains and moves your body frequently, and someone who deals with, injury from athletes and from general population, you really understand the full spectrum, which is, something we value so much in our colleagues at Trailside, is just this similarity in lifestyle and values. And, proponent, or just big enthusiasts of being outdoors and using your body in an athletic way, whether you see yourself as an athlete or not. We kind of see an athlete, version of an athlete in everyone that we work with. And so I think that's a huge asset to people coming to your clinic and seeking your services in particular. So that's pretty cool. And we're excited. And we've been working with Trailside, like I said, for, a decade, if not longer. And you guys are phenomenal, and I'm really excited for our people to get to know you better if they haven't already. And a lot of our members at Envision Fitness, we refer them like crazy out to you guys, and you take such good care of them. So we're super grateful for that. And all of our members who are working with you already, they're like, Christina, she's a superstar. So we're pretty excited to have you featured on our expert segments, specifically for Red May. So that's kind of what we're talking about, is just using your expertise to help our followers out there kind of figure out how to keep themselves healthy, or recognize the early symptoms of when things are maybe starting to accumulate toward an injury. And if we can stop that process before it gets out of hand, that would be super helpful. We talked about just, maybe discussing things that pop up in the lower leg, like shin splints and Achilles tendinopathy or tendonitis, as well as plantar fasciitis. That's a pretty big world of lower leg stuff. We could talk for hours, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But let's maybe stay focused on like shin splints. Now, can you tell me a little bit more, like a shin splint? Is that like a splinter in your shin? Like, what does that mean?
Shin splints is kind of the generic term for this pain that we'll get in the lower part of the front of our shin, and it runs right along that bone there, and it's quite uncomfortable. And I mean, no, your bone is not splintering. Really what we're experiencing there is muscle fibers pulling on that most superficial layer of our bone. So we are getting this tugging on the bone of where it's wanting to separate, because it's either overuse, it's overstrained, something's happening there. If you catch it fairly early on and are able to address it, and early on meaning when it's starting to feel, sore to the touch down the front lower part of your shin, which no, it shouldn't be, common,
Oh, interesting.
but not, you know, like you had mentioned the last segment, is healthy tissue doesn't hurt, right?
Right.
So if you're starting to experience that, or a common one is while we're ramping up your training in Red May or otherwise, if you're starting to feel earlier fatigue and discomfort in your shin as your reason for wanting to stop your run, those are signs that we may be experiencing what could start towards a shin splint. And
That's
I mean,
fascinating.
yeah, if shin splints get bad enough, they can lead to a stress fracture, but generally shin splints on their own prior to that is just that tugging on the
And I think that's really important to kind of, like explain to people is how that you're doing such a great job of explaining what little symptoms they could pay attention to. So, sometimes if we kind of go, oh, do I have, try to check the box, do I have shin splints or not? If I don't even know what that is, I'm not paying attention. Or if I've
bone.
associated like a severe symptom with it, and if I wait until it gets there, then my recovery process and prevention process can be a lot longer. So I like what you're saying is like a quick self-assessment could just be like, reach down and squeeze the front of your shin, kind of the lower part of your leg. And what does that feel like? Is the bone tender to touch? Just notice it, right? And it
Mhm.
doesn't essentially mean if something bad is happening or you might not have shin splints, but it could be an indication that if there's tenderness there, that you potentially have more risk for, just uncomfortable things coming in the future. And also I like that one, I hadn't actually heard that before, is if you're exercising and you're feeling fatigue in the front of your leg, basically kind of in your shin area or your
Mhm.
calves or something like that. And I think a lot of people would just chalk that up to as normal. Well, I'm out of shape, of course things are feeling like, or it's supposed to hurt when I run. I know a lot of runners is like, well, of course this is uncomfortable. This is just the discomfort of being, out of shape, or whatever label that people might put in them. So if we just kind of dive deeper, that actually that localized fatigue could be a sign of something, and just to notice it, as well as that, tenderness to touch. So if people kind of watch the segment and they do kind of like, oh, I did that sort of touch test and it is feeling a little bit sensitive, or I do notice that fatigue, what might be something that they could then like look to that could be commonly related to that kind of symptom?
Yeah, so I mean, shin pain in the front, like if you do that squeeze test, I mean, I don't want people to panic and immediately like, oh God, I've got shin splints, I need to stop running.
Sure.
That's not quite the case. It just means that there's something that we need to address there so that your body can move efficiently. So let me just preface that, you know, just because you touch your shin, if it hurts, the world is not over. You may continue with Red May. Just something to be
Yeah.
aware of that.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, if we're starting to feel tightness and some of those things, let's just address it early, because we don't know where that whole where it might become symptomatic, truly symptomatic later. So we'll go with that. But something that I look at a lot, and it's not exclusive to this. Like if you guys were to see me, I'm going to check out a lot of things. But something that I see a lot with shin splints is a lack of ankle range of motion,
Okay.
particularly dorsiflexion. So being able to pull your foot and your toes back towards your shin versus
Mm,
pointing it down like you're pushing on a gas pedal. So bringing
okay.
it back towards you is dorsiflexion. If we are missing that range of motion, our body has an incredible way of still figuring out how to get things done.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's not meant to work around dysfunction long term. So it can do it in a pinch, and it's awesome. But if we're missing that range of motion, most likely we will end up starting to work around it, usually in a pronated walking pattern, meaning I'm going to start to go roll towards my arch. I'm going to start to work around that lack of bend,
Hmm.
which just makes our foot have to try to correct around that in a different stage of our running.
Sure.
And it can create things like shin splints. It can create plantar fasciitis or Achilles tendonitis. It can create other things. But
Mm.
but that's something that I like to check for people with shin splints, is their ankle range of motion.
So what's something that people can do at home to set up a way to measure their ankle range of motion, to see whether it's appropriate or what they can do next?
Yeah, in the clinic, we really prefer to do a knee to wall test. It's a great way to test that range of motion while you're standing, and it's very easy to replicate at home. So generally, if you were to put a tape measure on the floor closest to the wall, and measure somewhere between 4 to 5 inches back from the wall, you should be able to put your foot flat and big toe on that, 4 or 5 inch mark. Keep your foot flat and still bend your knee towards the wall and get your knee to touch. So that is an easy way for us to test that range of motion.
Right on. Yeah, that's something that we do at the gym as well. When a member joins the gym, we kind of do an ankle range of motion assessment. We do something similar. And I know at Trailside, you guys actually have, like, I think it's like painter's tape or something, like laid out on the floor, or like masking tape, and then you have like increments taped off. So if the tape measure, if you want something a little more semi-permanent, you could maybe make out your own like little tape, literally a tape measure,
Yeah.
Can't take.
Yeah, we have athletic tape all over the floors.
Yeah, there you go.
So we can test it wherever we've got a spot.
Yeah, so you basically,
super easy. Yeah.
Right on, and that way you can just leave it on the floor and, like, look at your range of motion, and if you do notice that you at the 4-inch mark and you can't touch the knee to the wall without some sort of compensation happening with your heel popping off the ground, your ankle rolling, one direction or the other, then okay, I've noticed I've got this, I can't do it. So what's the next kind of thing? Once I've noticed I've got this ankle limitation, where could I start to try to help that? I know it's sort of a complex issue. Usually, there's lots of assessment that you might do, but if we had to start with one thing, outside of connecting with your local expert physio, where might you start?
Yeah, probably the most easiest is, and the most common is starting to address your calf and your Achilles. So really foam rolling through your calf, or using one of those runner sticks to roll out your calf, or for a lot of my clients, I just ask them if they have a standard rolling pin at home. So, I mean, whatever you can get a hold of to roll your calves, and then stretch them. That's the easiest in terms of getting soft tissue to loosen that up. And then really going through, you guys that participated at Envision, going through those, your cars for your ankle. Really exploring all the range of motion that's available there, and just kind of pushing into those corners. I really just have not figured out another way to say that.
I like it. The corners of the range of motion, I think.
Yeah.
When I think of a corner, I think of like some place up in the ceiling that has like cobwebs, because we never really use it. So I see where you're going with, like, a corner of a joint is like that unexplored end territory, right? We usually kind of stay in the safe zone where we use it most, and we want to get to where the cobwebs are. So
totally. And I really encourage my people to kind of, I never want you pushing into pain, but I'm okay with you flirting on that edge of, this is uncomfortable, I'm not comfortable here, let's push into that, let's explore that, but not crossing the line into pain. So that's how far you can kind of take those stretches and the pushes of that range of motion.
So I'm hearing that ankle range of motion is really one of the key limiters or gateways to both preventative health and kind of the rehabilitation process. So whether or not you're worried about shin splints, or you have questions about that, is it true that ankle range of motion also has an impact potentially on plantar fasciitis and Achilles issues as well, or are those kind of separate?
I mean, there's, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of things that I would look at, but I definitely check out ankle dorsiflexion for those other two common issues as well. It's just so important. If you have a joint that is not moving through its fullest available range. It just creates inefficiencies for
Mhm.
pull on the soft tissues around it. And the ankle joint is probably in those three or those four things the least likely to actually be symptomatic. But our plantar fascia, our shin splints, our Achilles, man, they scream a whole lot louder. So that's what you guys usually end up coming to see me
Yeah,
for, and they're just where we had the breakdown, whereas the
I
problem was
gotcha.
the ankle range of motion. So
Sure, I hear that. And what I think is helpful for, our audience to know is like there's almost a trifecta approach, if not more, to this, right? Is just kind of from the physio perspective is looking at what are the limitations in range of motion or strength training or compensations in gait or something that you guys can offer perspective on. There's from a fitness professional, the strength and resilience of the tissue. So do we have requisite range of motion? And then do we have the movement mechanics and the strength in the tissue? So how are we following a progressive approach to volume of activity? Are we qualified to do those activities? And then, our experts at Soul Experience that are, so helpful in ordering in and looking at your foot and looking at the way that you run and your running mechanics themselves, just like the technique that you use, and supplying you with the right footwear, because I know that plays a big part into it too, and making sure. And some of us are trying to like save money and we don't buy new shoes often enough, or maybe don't have the right fit because we buy for style as opposed to
yeah.
the way that our body articulates with the ground, and the shoe that best sort of helps us transition around some of our compensations. So I think today's conversation has been a great, just sort of a surface announcement of and reflection on what you can do to take care of your body. And I really appreciate your time, Christina. I look forward to doing more of these videos with you. We can deep dive. And I think for any of our viewers and listeners out there, if you have any kind of physio related question to as you're going through Red May and you want to talk more about it, I'm sure Christina and I would be happy to jump on here and just sort of like, go through some of the stuff. So please go ahead in the comments, let us know what you're feeling about, or what you're feeling in your body, or what you're experiencing, what you want to know more about, and we can direct our segments toward what matters most. And Christina, if people are out there and they want to get a hold of you at Trailside Physio, what's the best way to do that?
If anyone has more questions, you can just shoot me an email. I'm on my computer all the time now these days. My email is Christina S at trailsidephysio.com. Christina with a CH. Not that I normally would care about that, but email won't come through if you spell it. So anyway.
All right, right on. Well, I hope you guys do reach out to Christina if you have further questions. And thanks so much for tuning in. Christina, thank you so much for your time. Twofold, because we did this twice, once pre-recorded, or once without recording, and once with recording. Thank you so much for that. I look forward to doing more of these with you.
Perfect.
All right,
Thanks,
take care
Kari.
out there, guys. You're welcome.